This is the third move in as many years for William and Kate. In 2022, they left London for Windsor, for Adelaide Cottage, and now they're moving again.
A rare official statement from Kensington Palace has stunned Britain and ignited a wave of speculation about the future of the monarchy. The announcement confirmed that the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, will be leaving Adelaide Cottage, the Windsor retreat.
Because for the Waleses, Adelaide Cottage is seen as the cursed house, a place that holds too many bad memories.
That was once hailed as their perfect family sanctuary. The decision was not presented as a minor adjustment in living arrangements, but as a deliberate, permanent shift, one that carries implications far beyond domestic convenience. For 2 years, Adelaide Cottage symbolised the Wales family's careful balance between duty and privacy. The move there in 2022 was framed as a deeply human choice, proximity to Queen Elizabeth II in her final years, and the promise of a quieter upbringing for George, Charlotte, and Louis. At the time, the rationale was accepted with warmth. Yet today, the sudden departure from this supposed haven is being interpreted very differently. The timing has fueled widespread unease. Why would William and Catherine, who have cultivated such a stable image, uproot their family once again? Was the modest 4-bedroom cottage suddenly inadequate? Or does this abrupt transition reveal deeper strains inside Windsor, the symbolic heart of the monarchy? These questions have turned what might have been dismissed as a private decision into a national debate. On social media, in living rooms, and across the front pages of British newspapers, speculation has erupted that this is no ordinary relocation. Reactions within the royal sphere have been even sharper. At Kensington Palace, staff were instructed to confirm the news in carefully measured language. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace, the residence of King Charles III, maintained a striking silence. That silence spoke volumes. In corridors where discretion is an art form, aides and courtiers exchanged knowing glances while refusing to comment. Yet the whispers could not be contained. According to some close sources, the Waleses sought a new home for reasons of family comfort and space. Others insist this is a calculated repositioning, a clear sign that Prince William intends to chart his own path, distinct from his father's influence. In either case, the symbolism is undeniable. Once celebrated as the ideal retreat for a modern royal family, Adelaide Cottage is now framed as temporary, an interim step rather than a final destination. The official confirmation, though terse, suggested there was more beneath the surface than was being disclosed, and by attempting to control the narrative, the palace may only have intensified the speculation. The press responded with predictable intensity. Headlines seized on the possibility of hidden motives, framing the move as evidence of internal rivalries and even betrayal. Some royal experts speculated aloud whether the Prince of Wales might ascend sooner than anticipated. Every word of the official statement was passed for double meaning, and even the silence of the king was interpreted as resistance. The air surrounding the monarchy is now heavy with unresolved questions, and public trust in the institution's stability has been unsettled once again. Those closest to the throne may offer the most revealing insight. Sources suggest King Charles was personally uneasy about the timing. Having only recently begun to establish his reign and its character, he now faces a future heir who appears willing to break from tradition at a delicate moment. Some observers see the move as a subtle but unmistakable signal. William and Catherine intend to build a monarchy that is not bound by rigid expectations of the past. This interpretation has divided opinion. Admirers have praised the couple's courage in prioritizing family life, modern values, and independence over the rituals of pomp and protocol. Critics, however, have denounced the decision as reckless, even treacherous, proof that the very foundations of monarchy are weakening. Yet even as detractors voice alarm, the symbolism of this moment cannot be ignored. In an institution where every relocation carries meaning, the Prince and Princess of Wales have ensured their decision will be seen as much more than where they sleep. It is now a declaration about the future of the crown itself. Kensington Palace may have hoped to quell speculation with its brief confirmation. Instead, it has opened a new chapter in the story of the monarchy, a chapter defined by tension, independence, and uncertainty. The Waleses have moved a piece on the royal chessboard, and the ripple effects will be felt far beyond the gates of Adelaide Cottage. To understand why the recent announcement shook the monarchy, we must go back to the summer of 2022. At that time, William and Catherine stunned Britain by leaving apartment 1 Ampere at Kensington Palace, a sprawling 20-room residence that had long been their base in London. It placed them at the centre of royal life, within reach of every ceremonial duty, and under constant observation from the public and the press. The abrupt move to Adelaide Cottage, a modest 4-bedroom house in Windsor Great Park, seemed almost incomprehensible. Why would the future King and Queen consort trade grandeur for simplicity? On the surface, the decision was wrapped in family reasoning. Queen Elizabeth II's health was visibly in decline. To William and Catherine, being an hour away in London was unthinkable. They sought proximity to the Queen, both to support her in her final years and to ensure their children could know her not only as a monarch, but as a great-grandmother. The symbolism was powerful. Living in Windsor placed them physically close to the matriarch who had defined modern royalty for 70 years. Adelaide Cottage, though small by royal standards, became a living link to the Crown's continuity. But there was another dimension, less visible yet no less important. Catherine, in particular, had long viewed Kensington Palace as a gilded cage. Every outing, every movement, every stroll in the gardens was captured by lenses. Raising 3 children under such scrutiny was unsustainable. Windsor offered an escape. It gave George, Charlotte, and Louis the ability to walk to school, to play in open fields, and to live moments of childhood away from constant cameras. Adelaide Cottage gave them privacy, space, and what Catherine often described as a slice of normal life. Royal observers at the time praised the move as heartwarming, even sacrificial. The couple traded prestige for parenting. Yet within palace circles, there was quiet skepticism. Adelaide Cottage was never designed for long-term use by a future monarch's family. Its limited size and facilities made it unsuitable for state functions, security requirements, and the growing demands of 3 children destined for public roles. Insiders admitted privately that the cottage was a stopgap. It was never meant to last. Still, in those early months, the decision served its purpose. Around the dinner table, the Wales family experienced the quiet life they had long craved. School runs in Windsor, muddy boots after football practice, laughter away from the flashbulbs. These moments carried weight far beyond their simplicity. For William and Catherine, each day in Windsor tested a question. Could the monarchy exist outside London's glittering machinery? Could the heir to the throne live differently, not defined by centuries of pomp, but by family-centered choices? The answer, though not public at the time, was already emerging. Adelaide Cottage was not just a retreat, it was an experiment. Every choice made within those 4 bedrooms, whether to prioritize privacy, whether to decline unnecessary staff, whether to limit exposure, was part of a larger rehearsal. This was not merely about where the family slept, it was about redefining what the monarchy itself could look like in the hands of the next generation. Catherine's influence was central to this trial run. Determined to shield her children from the relentless pressures of royal identity, she used Windsor as a protective barrier. She insisted on schooling that emphasized normality over privilege, playtime in natural surroundings rather than palace courtyards, and family meals cooked in a modest kitchen rather than orchestrated by staff. In doing so, she laid the groundwork for a vision of royalty that places humanity above spectacle. Adelaide Cottage, therefore, was never a final chapter. It was a prologue, a controlled test of whether the Prince and Princess of Wales could detach themselves from the machinery of London without losing their standing or their ability to carry out duties. The quiet roads of Windsor were not an escape from duty, but a pause, a chance to breathe, and a strategic decision to plant seeds for a different future. The world may have seen Adelaide Cottage as charming, even quaint, but William and Catherine always understood it as temporary. Every school drop-off, every private family supper carried a hidden weight, proof that a different style of monarchy could survive, even thrive. It was a lesson written not in royal decrees, but in the daily routines of a family determined to do things differently. The Windsor experiment was never about retreat. It was about preparation. The cottage was chosen not for its beauty, but for its symbolism, a deliberate step away from tradition, a signal that the next generation of the monarchy would not be confined by golden cages. And in that choice, William and Catherine set the stage for the dramatic events unfolding today. Speculation is the lifeblood of royal reporting, and in the months after William and Catherine settled into Adelaide Cottage, the press turned speculation into an industry. Everyone seemed to agree that the cottage, quaint and charming as it was, could not possibly serve as a long-term residence for the future King and Queen of Britain. From the tabloids to the broadsheets, from late-night talk shows to online forums, one question dominated: where would the Wales family go next? The most persistent rumour centred on Fort Belvedere. To many viewers, the name carried an air of mystery, but to those familiar with royal history, it was loaded with scandal. Nestled in Windsor Great Park, the property had space, grandeur, and seclusion. It was, on paper, exactly the kind of residence that could meet the demands of a growing royal family. Yet it also bore the indelible stain of abdication. It was from Fort Belvedere that Edward VIII, in 1936, signed away the throne for Wallis Simpson, sending the monarchy into its greatest constitutional crisis of the 20th century. For decades, the estate had been quietly avoided, whispered about as cursed ground. Yet the idea of William and Catherine reclaiming it caught fire. Commentators framed it as a dramatic gesture of redemption. Could the heir to the throne take the very house associated with betrayal and turn it into a beacon of responsibility? Could a new generation overwrite the past by living openly in a place once shrouded in shame? The story practically wrote itself. Tabloid headlines fueled the frenzy. Phrases like "the Wolseys to reclaim the House of Scandal" and "redemption at Fort Belvedere" dominated front pages. Long columns speculated on what the transformation of the estate might symbolize for the monarchy's future. It wasn't just about bricks and mortar, it was about rewriting history in real time. But inside palace walls, the whispers were more restrained and more cautious. Senior aides, schooled in the fine art of discretion, warned against such a move. To them, the association with abdication was not a wound that could be healed, but a scar that should remain untouched. Bringing 3 young heirs into that house, they argued, would risk reviving ghosts better left in the past. It would be a constant reminder of failure, one palace source told a reporter off the record. Still, the rumours persisted. In fact, the more the palace stayed silent, the more the speculation grew. Silence was treated as tacit confirmation. Commentators debated endlessly on talk radio, in podcasts, and across social media. Was reclaiming Fort Belvedere a sign of bold innovation, or would it amount to an unforgivable provocation? Public opinion split sharply. Supporters of William and Catherine, particularly younger Britons, saw the rumoured move as a daring act of modern leadership. To them, it was poetic. The couple who symbolised stability and service would reclaim a house that once symbolised abdication and disgrace, turning shame into strength. On the other side, traditionalists bristled. The idea of the Prince of Wales living in Edward VIII's house felt to them like sacrilege, an affront to monarchy's survival. The polarisation reflected a deeper cultural debate. Could the monarchy modernise without dismantling its symbols? Meanwhile, the practical pressures on the family were intensifying. George, Charlotte, and Louis were growing quickly, their lives increasingly shaped by school, friends, and the awareness of their future roles. Adelaide Cottage, once perfect for small children, was now limiting. Royal observers asked pointed questions. Could a future king realistically prepare for his role in a 4-bedroom cottage? Would schoolwork be done at the kitchen table, or in a proper study worthy of his station? These questions were not just trivial details. They cut to the heart of the monarchy's image, whether the next generation would be raised in ordinary circumstances or within the traditional trappings of royal expectation. Reporters, sensing that a move was imminent, crowded Windsor with cameras and notebooks. Small details became news. A passing landscaper's casual comment was treated as evidence. A delivery truck seen near the gates was photographed and dissected online. Even the silence of palace staff, their tight smiles and refusal to answer, was interpreted as confirmation. The rumour mill was relentless, and Fort Belvedere sat at the centre of it. By late 2023, the narrative had reached fever pitch. Headlines proclaimed that an announcement was imminent. Analysts declared with certainty that Fort Belvedere was the destination. The storyline had all the elements of a royal drama: history, scandal, betrayal, redemption. Even those skeptical of the move could not deny that it had captured the imagination of the country. And then came the twist. The truth, when it arrived, surprised even seasoned royal correspondents. It was not Fort Belvedere, and it was not Kensington Palace. The Wales family was preparing to move, but the destination was something entirely unexpected. Not cursed ground, not historic grandeur, but a place so obscure that even veteran journalists had to consult a map to locate it. The speculation had been fierce, but the reality would prove even more shocking. The speculation had built for months. Reporters, analysts, and insiders all but declared Fort Belvedere as the Wales family's inevitable new home. The narrative was set, the headlines were drafted. But then Kensington Palace issued a brief, carefully worded confirmation, and it was something no one expected. William and Catherine were not moving into Fort Belvedere. They were not returning to Kensington Palace. They were not choosing Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. Instead, they were relocating to Forest Lodge, a residence so obscure that even seasoned royal correspondents had to search for its name on a map. The announcement landed like a thunderclap. Forest Lodge? Most Britons had never heard of it. Unlike the palaces etched into public consciousness, this house was a virtual unknown, tucked discreetly inside the Windsor estate. It lacked the golden gates of Buckingham, the military grandeur of Windsor Castle, or the historical resonance of Clarence House. To the press, it was almost nothing, and yet, within hours of the statement, Forest Lodge became the centerpiece of national debate. Observers quickly realized the obscurity was the point. William and Catherine had chosen deliberately. By rejecting the grand residences that defined royalty for centuries, they were signaling a break from traditions so profound that it could only be interpreted as a statement of independence. This was not about comfort or convenience. It was about strategy. Commentators struggled to process the symbolism. Buckingham Palace has for generations been described as the beating heart of the monarchy. Windsor Castle was the late Queen Elizabeth II's beloved refuge, a symbol of continuity through war and peace. To decline both was astonishing. To instead select a quiet, almost anonymous property was even more extraordinary. "This is more than a move," one royal correspondent said during a live broadcast. "It is a declaration." William and Catherine are saying, in effect, "We will not be defined by the palaces that defined others. We will choose our own path." The comparisons were swift and relentless. Why not Buckingham Palace, the traditional seat of kingship? Why not Windsor Castle, which represented Elizabeth's legacy and stability? The answers, whispered through palace corridors, were telling. William and Catherine wanted distance from the oppressive grandeur, the endless ceremonies, and the relentless scrutiny that those properties carried. They wanted a sanctuary where they could raise their children with some semblance of privacy, shielded from both paparazzi and palace bureaucracy. Forest Lodge, while large by ordinary standards, is modest in royal terms. It does not carry the ceremonial trappings of state. It does not host banquets for visiting heads of state. It is not a fortress of symbolism. Instead, it is quiet, isolated, and adaptable. That was precisely what the Wales family wanted, a canvas upon which they could paint their vision of a new monarchy. But beneath the surface, the decision also carried political weight. In choosing Forest Lodge, William and Catherine signalled a subtle but unmistakable power play. They refused to step into the palaces everyone assumed would be theirs. They turned away from centuries of protocol and expectation, and in doing so, they whispered a message both to the world and to the institution. The monarchy in their hands would not be dictated solely by history. The reaction was immediate and divided. Supporters hailed the move as daring and forward-looking, proof that William and Catherine were serious about reshaping the monarchy for a modern era. They are prioritizing family over formality, one commentator observed. They are proving that duty does not have to mean living inside a museum. Critics, however, were unnerved. To them, Forest Lodge represented a dilution of majesty. Without the grandeur of Buckingham or Windsor, what distinguished the monarchy from any other wealthy family living in seclusion? They are stripping away the aura that keeps the monarchy alive, one critic argued. Still, even detractors admitted the choice was groundbreaking. The monarchy has always thrived on symbolism, and in this case, William and Catherine had chosen an entirely new symbol. Not pomp, not ceremony, not tradition, but survival. Forest Lodge, in its anonymity, represented a retreat from spectacle and a commitment to something more personal, even intimate. In live television discussions, the decision was dissected from every angle. Was this a retreat from responsibility or a reimagining of it? Was it a rejection of tradition or the only way to preserve the monarchy in an era of skepticism and scrutiny? Analysts debated whether William was positioning himself as a different kind of king, one who draws legitimacy not from marble halls and gilded ceilings, but from relatability and independence. For the public, the intrigue was magnetic. The idea that the future king and queen had turned away from Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, the icons of monarchy itself, was almost inconceivable. Yet it was also undeniably modern. In an age where public trust in institutions is fragile, William and Catherine seemed to be betting that authenticity would matter more than ceremony. And so Forest Lodge, a name few had heard before, became a national obsession overnight. It was no longer just a house. It was a symbol, a stage, and a battlefield where the future of the monarchy would be tested. The message was clear. William and Catherine were not afraid to defy expectations. They had made their move. Now, the world was left to interpret what it meant. When Kensington Palace confirmed that William and Catherine were leaving Adelaide Cottage for Forest Lodge, the official statement was carefully polished. It spoke of privacy, family, and practical needs. But behind those phrases lay something raw, something personal that no press release could capture. To truly understand this move, one must look beyond logistics and strategy. At its core, Forest Lodge is not simply a new residence. It is a sanctuary, an escape from grief, a reset button for a family that has carried more loss and pressure than the public ever fully saw. The past few years have been brutal for the House of Windsor. In April 2021, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, died at the age of 99. His death marked the end of an era, stripping the monarchy of its patriarch and leaving Queen Elizabeth II without her lifelong partner. For William, the loss was not only institutional but deeply personal. He had admired his grandfather's steadiness and sense of duty, and his passing was a painful reminder of mortality and legacy. Just a year later, in September 2022, the monarchy suffered its greatest blow in living memory. Queen Elizabeth II died after a reign of 70 years, bringing the nation to a standstill. The world saw the pageantry of mourning, the solemn ceremonies, and the seamless transfer of power to King Charles III. What it did not see was the private devastation within the Wales household. For William, Elizabeth was not only his grandmother but also his mentor, the figure who had guided him through every stage of his public life. For Catherine, she was both sovereign and confidant, And for George, Charlotte and Louis, she was Gan, their great-grandmother. Adelaide Cottage, chosen in part to be close to the Queen during her final years, became haunted after her passing. The walls carried memories that were no longer comforting but heavy. Every family dinner echoed with absence. Every walk through Windsor brought reminders of the matriarch who was gone. The children, still young, were forced to grapple with grief at an age when loss should have been a distant concept. The cottage, once a refuge, became a reminder of what had been lost. For Catherine, the pressure was compounded by her own health challenges. Though handled with grace in public, she endured intense scrutiny over her well-being. Every rare absence sparked worldwide speculation. Every photo was analysed for signs of strain. The polished exterior she presented to the cameras masked an inner toll. Sources close to the family suggest that she longed for a space where she could heal without constant reminders of duty pressing in on every corner. Forest Lodge, with its seclusion and quieter atmosphere, offered precisely that. William, too, was carrying invisible burdens. He was mourning as a grandson, worrying as a father, and preparing as a king in waiting, all at once. Adelaide Cottage had served its purpose, but it had never allowed him to separate the man from the monarch. It was both preparation ground and prison, where family life and crown responsibilities constantly collided. The death of his grandmother crystallized a realization. He needed more than a house. He needed a space where he could breathe, a refuge where he could be both father and future king, without one role suffocating the other. Forest Lodge became that refuge. Its choice was practical, yes, larger rooms, more privacy, better security, but it was also deeply symbolic. It marked a conscious decision to step away from spaces heavy with memory and expectation. It was an act of resilience, a way to draw a line between past grief and future hope. For the children, it promised laughter returning to hallways no longer overshadowed by ghosts. For their parents, it promised a chance to recover their strength away from the constant pressures of duty, yet even this personal decision carried political weight. In royal life, personal and institutional are never separate. By moving to Forest Lodge, William and Catherine sent a clear message. They would not allow themselves to be defined solely by history's shadows or by the machinery of monarchy. They would claim their right to create a space of healing on their own terms, with their own resources. The fact that they funded the renovations themselves only reinforced this message. No public money, no controversies, no accusations of indulgence. Just a family trying to rebuild in peace. This duality, the personal sanctuary that doubles as a political statement, has become a hallmark of William and Catherine's approach. Every step taken toward privacy is also a step toward modernizing the monarchy. Every rejection of traditional grandeur is also a rejection of outdated expectations. Their move to Forest Lodge is as much about survival as it is about symbolism. Analysts note that by creating a refuge for themselves, they are also creating a new template for the crown, one where monarchs are not trapped by ceremonial palaces, not suffocated by gilded cages, but free to define their lives in ways that prioritize family and humanity. To some, this is a dangerous dilution of majesty. To others, it is the only way the monarchy can survive in the 21st century. But beyond the debates and commentary, one truth stands out. Forest Lodge represents hope after hardship. It is where William and Catherine teach their children that loss does not have to define them, that even after the greatest tragedies, life can be rebuilt. It is where the monarchy, often seen as an institution of unchanging ritual, shows that it too can adapt, reset, and begin again. And so, the move to Forest Lodge is not only about a family's need for space, it is about resilience, it is about healing, it is about proving that in the face of grief, there can still be renewal. The move to Forest Lodge was presented by Kensington Palace as a matter-of-fact decision, a relocation driven by privacy and family needs. But within the walls of Britain's most powerful institution, it has triggered something far more serious. division, resentment, and a clash over the very identity of the monarchy. What to the public looked like a family's fresh start has, behind palace doors, become a test of loyalty and authority. At the centre of this unease stands King Charles III. Barely 2 years into his reign, the king is still shaping his legacy. His leadership, marked by a commitment to continuity and tradition, is suddenly challenged by his own heir. For Charles, the symbolism of palaces matters. Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Clarence House are not just homes, they are living embodiments of monarchy's endurance. Every monarch before him has embraced them as both residence and statement. To see William and Catherine turn their backs on them was, in the king's view, more than a personal choice. It was a breach of tradition that risked undermining the authority of the crown itself. Friends of the king say he was deeply unsettled by the timing. His reign is still fragile, still finding its footing in a post-Elizabethan era, and his son's bold independence seemed to overshadow him. For Charles, it raised a difficult question. If the heir to the throne is already rewriting the rules, how much space remains for the king to lead in his own right? Queen Camilla, sources suggest, took the decision even more personally. Having spent decades navigating public hostility to secure her place in the royal family, she now finds herself once again sidelined, this time not by public opinion, but by the next generation. Windsor Castle, long sacred to Elizabeth II and central to Charles and Camilla's vision of monarchy, has been effectively rejected by William and Catherine. To Camilla, this was not only a dismissal of tradition, but also a pointed signal that she and Charles represented the past, while the younger Waleses represented the future. According to one insider, Camilla saw Forest Lodge not as a family refuge, but as a symbolic wall, a statement that the next era of monarchy will be built without her influence. Yet not everyone within the royal family views the move with alarm. Princess Anne, known for her practicality and disdain for pomp, is said to quietly support her nephew's choice. Anne has long believed that the survival of the monarchy depends on trimming excess, focusing on duty, and rejecting unnecessary ceremony. To her, Forest Lodge is a logical step, a home that reflects modern values of restraint and family focus, rather than a gilded spectacle. Though she has not spoken publicly, her approval underscores a generational divide. Traditionalists like Charles and Camilla on one side, reformers like William and Anne on the other. The staff who serve the monarchy are equally divided. For some, the shift is welcome. Running enormous palaces with outdated infrastructure is costly and exhausting. A smaller, simpler home means fewer resources wasted and a more sustainable model of service. Others, however, feel betrayed. Serving in Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle has always been more than a job. It was a badge of honour, a place in history. To watch the heir to the throne step away from those halls feels to them like a rejection of the very institution they dedicated their lives to uphold. Beyond palace walls, the political world has also weighed in. Some members of Parliament praised William and Catherine for refusing taxpayer-funded extravagance. By paying for renovations at Forest Lodge themselves, they signalled a refreshing shift toward accountability. Others, however, worry that stripping away royal grandeur risks erasing the mystique that distinguishes the monarchy from ordinary wealthy families. If the future king lives like any other affluent Briton, they ask, what makes the crown unique? The debate has spilled into the public sphere, where commentators frame the move as either heroic modernization or reckless rebellion. Supporters call William and Catherine visionaries, bringing the monarchy into the 21st century with transparency and relatability. Detractors accuse them of dismantling centuries of tradition piece by piece, turning the crown into something ordinary. What cannot be denied is that the move has exposed fault lines within the monarchy. Charles feels undermined, Camilla feels slighted, Anne feels vindicated, and the staff are split between admiration and disappointment. The Waleses themselves remain silent, allowing the symbolism of their choice to speak louder than words. This silence, however, only amplifies the uncertainty. Is Forest Lodge truly a forever home, the foundation upon which William and Catherine will raise their children and build their vision of monarchy? Or is it merely another move in a longer strategy, a temporary refuge before the next reshaping of the crown? Globally, the implications are enormous. In an era where monarchies are questioned and traditions are fading, the House of Windsor is testing whether it can survive by becoming more relatable and less ceremonial. Supporters see in William a people's king, a leader who understands that survival requires adaptation. Critics see a dangerous gamble that risks stripping away the very majesty that gives the monarchy purpose. The monarchy has always endured by balancing continuity with change, but rarely has that balance felt so precarious. The Wales's relocation has forced Britain to confront a question it can no longer avoid. Can the monarchy exist without the symbols that once defined it? As Forest Lodge becomes the Wales family's base, the institution itself stands at a crossroads. Within its walls, William and Catherine seek peace, healing, and a new way forward. Outside, the monarchy faces growing doubts, rising divisions, and an uncertain future. For now, one truth remains undeniable: the crown has been shaken, and whether Forest Lodge becomes a sanctuary of renewal or a symbol of rebellion, its impact will reverberate far beyond Windsor.